Okay, can you hear me?
Should be recorded. Great, thanks.
Would you like me to start from the beginning?
Yeah, please.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you.
No worries. Okay, so again, my name is Crystal and I'll be presenting the project before you this evening. So for the benefit of the board, as well as members of the public in attendance tonight, I'm going to begin by providing an overview of the board's role at tonight's hearing. And I will follow that by a background of the project site, a description of the proposed project, staff's analysis as it relates to the applicable design-related guidelines and regulations, an overview of the public comments that we've received to date, and I will conclude with a recommendation on the project. So this project is before the DRB as it proposes demolition of the existing commercial development and construction of a new hotel. The role of the DRB at this hearing is to consider whether the project is consistent with design-related regulations and guidelines. And in determining whether the project is consistent, the DRB should consider the analysis contained in the staff report, the staff and applicant presentations, and public comments received prior to and at this meeting. If the DRB finds that the project is consistent with the applicable findings and chooses to forward a recommendation for approval to the Planning Commission, conditions of approval should be identified by the board as deemed appropriate. The project is requesting the entitlements listed here, including an environmental and design review permit for new construction, an exception to exceed the maximum lot coverage, a sign exception to exceed the maximum number and size of signs allowed, a use permit to authorize establishment of the hotel, and variances to reduce the minimum front and street side setbacks, reduce the minimum amount of required landscaping, and reduce minimum parking stall dimensions to accommodate the proposed car lift. Entitlements are subject to review by the Planning Commission, who is the final decision-making body for this project. And as such, as noted in my previous slide, I'm going to be focusing my presentation to you this evening on the design-related aspects of the proposed project. So this image on the slide here is showing the location of the project site. So it's 1580 Lincoln Avenue. The project site is located on an approximately 17,770 square foot lot, and it's between Highway 101 and the Smart Rail corridor to the east and Lincoln Avenue to the west. As you can see here, the lot is flag shaped and has frontage on Grand Avenue to the north, Lincoln Avenue to the west, and Brookdale Avenue to the south. The site was formerly operated as the Slope Garden Center and contains a commercial retail building, outbuildings, and circulation improvements, all of which are proposed to be demolished to accommodate the proposed project. There is also a small parking area located within the public right-of-way and is accessible from the existing driveway along Grand Avenue. The site has a general plan land use designation of high density residential and a corresponding zoning designation of high density multifamily residential, which conditionally permits hotel uses. Uses that surround the site include multifamily residence to the west and south, offices located in converted single-family residential structures to the east, and the Villa Inn Motel, which is located north across Grand Avenue. I would also like to note that the structures located at 1811 and 1817 Grand Avenue, as well as 1601 Lincoln Avenue, all of which are shown on the image here, are recognized by the city as historical resources. As such, a historic report was prepared to determine the project's potential impacts, details of which will be summarized to the Planning Commission, though that report is available on the project website if anybody is interested in reviewing. As required by the city zoning ordinance, the project previously received conceptual design review by the DRB in November of 2020. Comments provided by the board are listed here and included recommendations that the applicant increase articulation at the entrance, articulate the second floor of the southeast facade, provide additional project exhibits to demonstrate the building design and impacts, replace natural grass and synthetic turf, replace the natural grass with synthetic turf, and then utilize permeable pavers to meet stormwater treatment requirements. As detailed in your staff report, the applicant revised the plans and provided additional information to address the board's comments. The project proposes, as I mentioned, to demolish the existing site improvements to construct a new 46-room, 4-story hotel, which has an approximately 13,340 square foot building footprint and approximately 44,485 square foot floor area. As shown here, the proposed site plan includes the hotel building, a small uncovered parking area and passenger loading zone adjacent to Grand Avenue, an outdoor cafe, patio adjacent to Lincoln Avenue, and a designated outdoor pet area, which is adjacent to Brookdale Avenue. The project also proposes to install landscape and hardscape areas, as well as paved surfaces, including sidewalks, curbs, and gutters within both on-site and within the Grand Avenue and Lincoln Avenue rights-of-way. Given the unique shape of the lot, there are 6 property lines from which the structure is measured to determine compliance with applicable setbacks. And these include 3 side property lines, 2 rear and 1 front, as shown on the image here. As noted previously, as well as in the staff report, the project is requesting variance to decrease the minimum setbacks from the front and street side property lines. And as proposed, the structure is located approximately 2 feet 8 inches from the front property line, again along Grand Avenue, and then 3 feet from the side property line adjacent to Lincoln Avenue. Overall, the building height is 54 feet 9 inches when measured from the tower element, which I'll discuss a little bit later on. And then overall 44 feet 9 inches when measured to the roof deck. The first floor is the largest of the 4 floors and consists of the 38-car covered parking area, including the mechanical parking lift. There's also the refuse enclosure, the lobby, cafe, and front desk area, bicycle storage room, which can accommodate up to 4 bicycles, and then hotel operation related areas, including employee break room, laundry area, storage, and some mechanical and electrical rooms. The second floor is approximately 10,850 square feet and consists of 2 private balconies, which are indicated here on this image at the north, east, and southwest corners of the building. The second floor includes a total of 14 guest rooms, as well as a boardroom, fitness room, and guest patio, which is parallel to Lincoln Avenue. And then again, some operation-related areas for the hotel use. And finally, the third and fourth floors consist of 15 and 17 guest rooms respectively, as well as employee offices, storage, and then mechanical and electrical rooms. So here you'll see the front elevation facing Grand Avenue. Features visible from this elevation include one of the private balconies at the northeast corner, the garage entrance, the 2 proposed blade signs, the second floor guest patio, and awnings over the front entrance. And then also just wanted to point out here from this elevation, you can see the building step back from the east elevation, which is intended to provide a height transition between the project site and 1817 Grand Avenue to the east. This slide is showing the rear elevation, which faces Brookdale. From here, you can see the second private balcony at the southwest corner, as well as the second floor guest patio, the first floor cafe patio, and the designated pet area, which is screened from view. This elevation also includes wall niche elements. However, you will note that there is no glazing included as part of these elements, and it is staff's understanding that this is intended to protect the privacy of nearby residences located along Brookdale. This slide includes views of the 2 side elevations, including the west elevation, which faces Lincoln Avenue, located on the top image, and then the east side facing Highway 101, which is located on the bottom. Lincoln Avenue is highly articulated, and it includes arched windows on the ground floor, as well as evenly spaced windows on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors. Also visible from this location are the 2 blade signs and the awnings above the entry, as well as the 2nd floor guest patio, 1st floor cafe patio, and the enclosed pet area. And then similarly, the interior elevation includes arched elements on the 1st floor, as well as windows on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors. And then the boxed area outlined in red shows the articulating features which the applicant added to address the design review board's recommendations included during concept review. And I would like to note, again, similar to the rear elevation, these features don't include glazing and are intended to protect privacy of the adjacent residences. Lastly, from this elevation, you can see the dashed lines, which indicate the location of an existing fence as well as a proposed fence. This slide just provides an overview of the proposed colors and materials to be used by the project, which includes cement plaster siding in the varying shades of brown, which are shown on the top, the stone trim and base, aluminum and metal tile roof and brick veneer. Here are a couple project renderings, which show additional views of the proposed hotel, including a view of a view looking southeast, which is located in the top left corner, a close-up view of the entrance on Grand Avenue on the top right, and then a view looking northeast in the bottom left, and lastly, a view looking north on Lincoln Avenue, and you can see the cafe patio in the foreground there on the bottom right. This slide shows the project's proposed landscaping, which is broken down by areas within the project site boundaries, as well as areas within the public right-of-way. The area that you see outlined in blue indicates the total area within the front and street side setback. And as shown here, the project proposes both traditional plant material and decorative outdoor landscaping within that area, both of which are defined as landscaping in the zoning ordinance. In addition, the project proposes landscaping and hardscaping within the interior portions of the lot, as well as within the Grand Avenue and Lincoln Avenue rights of way, including street trees and landscaping to screen that uncovered parking area from the adjacent property to the east. Again, as I discussed previously, one of the requested variances is to reduce the minimum landscaping. The requirement is 50% within the front and street side setback areas, whereas the project proposes to provide 48% within that front and street side setback area. I'll discuss this more later on, but the board is being asked to provide comments and recommendations on the proposed landscaping and the associated requested variance. Here you'll see the preliminary landscape palette, which includes trees, shrubs, ground covers, vines, and biofiltration plants, all of which require low to medium water use. And the project is subject to the standards of review listed here, which are more completely detailed in the staff report. So in general, staff has found that the project is consistent with design-related general plan policies, including those that are related to landscaping in the public right-of-way, consistency with design guidelines and standards, architectural design, massing, scale, height, parking, and lighting. The project has also been reviewed for consistency with the city's design guidelines for non-residential development, and again has been found consistent with these guidelines related to location and design of parking lots, landscaping, lighting, pedestrian circulation, building form, entryways, tower elements and colors and materials. And then generally, staff is seeking feedback from the board on the overall project design as it relates to these applicable policies and design guidelines. Project is also subject to the development standards of the HR1 zoning district, which are shown in the table here. Except for the project components where the applicant is seeking exceptions and variances for signage, setback, landscaping, and lot coverage, the project is consistent with all other applicable development standards. And staff would like to note, as I mentioned earlier, although the height of the tower exceeds the 54-foot height limit, this is permissible through the design review process as noted in the table here. Again, in general, staff finds that the exceptions and variances are consistent with the required findings for approval of such entitlements, which we will fully analyze in our report to the Planning Commission, including any comments and recommendations that the board provides at tonight's hearing. Staff is requesting that the board provide comments and recommendations on the proposed exception and variances, including recommendations on the sign location, size, type, and design, as well as the proposed site layout, including the reduction of the front and street side setbacks, the reduction to the amount of landscaping required, and the lot coverage, which proposes to exceed the maximum of 60% by 2%. Consistent with the city's requirements, tonight's hearing was noticed and several public comments were received on the project, many of which were in opposition. Members of the public have noted concerns related to the appropriateness of the hotel use at this specific location, as well as the height and scale of the building, concerns related to parking, traffic, loss of views, and noise. And I would also like to note that some commenters, it's not listed here, but some commenters have concerns about development occurring given the current drought condition that we're in. And then one comment was received in support of the project, and that commenter noted neighborhood benefits of site redevelopment, consistency with the vision of the city's general plan and the creation of jobs. So to conclude, staff recommends that the board discuss the project, taking into consideration the staff report, the presentations that you've heard tonight, and public comments. And we ask that you provide recommendations on the project and conditions where appropriate related to signage, setbacks, landscaping, lot coverage, and the overall project design. And then lastly, if the board agrees that the project is consistent with the city's design related regulations and guidelines, staff is recommending that the board forward a recommendation of approval to the Planning Commission, which, to reiterate, is the final decision-making body for the project. And that concludes my presentation. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing and pass it, I think, over to the applicant for a presentation.
Thank you, Crystal. Is the applicant ready for a presentation?
Can we ask questions of staff?
Yeah, I was going to say, first we should have, if there's any clarifying questions for staff.
Yeah.
From the board members.
Yeah, I had one. The off-street parking for the nursery before and for the proposed hotel looks like it's in the city right away.
Yes, that's correct. Mm-hmm.
And so they're allowed to do that. And sort of an extension of that, it looks like on sheet 8.8 when they're calculating their lot coverage, it looks like they're including the city right away in their lot coverage calcs because there's a gray area there.
You said sheet A8, was that,
A8.
is that correct?
Yeah, it appears that on the north side, that gray area is used for lot coverage calculation.
Oh, yes, I do see that. Yeah, that's a good question. You know, that might actually be, if it's okay, that might be a question for the applicant because that would, if I understand correctly, that would indicate a change in the required entitlement because if it's under that, that 60%, then they wouldn't need the exception. So I think I'd ask the applicant to clarify that, but it does look like from that exhibit that it is including that calculation, which we generally would not include because lot coverage would be limited to the site itself.
Right, which was my actual question. I was trying to get there eventually. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions of the planner? Yeah.
I have one question. There were some public comments referring to the tunnel effect in regards to San Rafael conversations. Is there any comment as part of the staff report in regards to that? Is it part of any of the official guidelines?
You know, I had heard that or I had seen that comment a couple of times and there wasn't anything that I saw in any of the city's regulating documents related to a tunnel effect. It's possible that maybe it was a conversation as part of the general plan update and community engagement and that sort of kind of process, but I didn't come across anything that referenced that specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? I had a question. The parking is less than what's required, but it's allowed if there's a traffic study that
Correct.
Supports it. Does that require some kind of a variance, or is that just because of the traffic study by right?
Yeah, so the code actually specifies for hotels that include a restaurant component that the applicant needs to prepare a traffic study to determine the number of parking spaces required. And I would be happy to pull that up. I don't have it up right at the moment, but if I remember correctly, the way that the traffic consultant determined the number of parking spaces was that they looked at several different hotels throughout the area of a similar size in terms of the number of rooms. And then they did parking counts. And I think that they also looked at the Institute of Traffic Engineers parking ratios to draw a conclusion why what's being proposed is appropriate for the site.
So the normal requirement would have been 50 parking spaces.
Correct.
And they are providing 38. And they are asking for a variance or an exception for the parking stall dimensions as well, right?
So the parking stall dimensions, the exception is related to the mechanical parking lift. And that's why we didn't include much more of a discussion in the staff presentation or in the staff report, because it's It's just kind of a blanket dimension that the manufacturer provides for that parking lift. But yeah, so they do still technically need a variance for that because it is less than what the city requires. Though we did have our public works department look at it and review it for circulation, and they were accepting of it.
They need a variance for the parking lift?
Yeah, for the dimensions of the park, because the dimensions of that lift are smaller than what we generally would require. But given that it's a parking lift and it's pre-manufactured, staff felt that we could support that, especially with public works being okay with the circulation.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Is the applicant, I think the applicant is Bob Sauvageau?
Yes, this is Bob Sauvageau with RYS Architects. So we do have a couple of images to share, and also Marcello Fonio, one of the owners, and Nicole Thompson from my office, RYS Architects, and Tom Holloway from Kla Landscape Architects will be speaking. But if we can start by sharing the images we have. And Marcello would like to say a few words.
Well, I think it was covered a lot as far as through the staff report, but thank you for meeting with us. My name is Marcello Fonio Jr. and my wife, Stephanie. We're happy to present our project this evening to the board members. My parents have owned the Villa Inn, which is across the street, for the past 25 years, and we've been part of the neighborhood since then. About a year ago, my wife and I purchased this property with the intention of building a hotel here.
And Stephanie Fonio, thanks again for meeting with us tonight. Appreciate your time. We're very excited for the opportunity to bring the hotel and cafe to the neighborhood. And with that, we will turn it over to Bob, Nicole, and Tom.
All right, thanks Stephanie and Marcello. And thanks Crystal for the very thorough staff report. So we know we have limited time. We're gonna focus on some of the items that were brought up in the staff report and previous in the conceptual design review board. But I'd like to start talking about our site access and building orientation. So the placement of our building and access from Lincoln, Grand, and Brookdale were reviewed very early on in discussions with the planning department, public works and traffic, and the fire department. Planning and traffic department liked our garage access on Grand, taking that off of Lincoln and not creating any curb cuts on Lincoln and keeping traffic off of Brookdale. But our building placement and site orientation was mostly driven by the fire department and their requirement for their ladder truck access to the roof. In discussions with the fire department, after looking at the three different sides they can get a truck on Brookdale, Lincoln, and Grand. Lincoln, the challenge there is there's some power and transmission lines all along that Lincoln frontage, making ladder access not possible along the Lincoln frontage. On Brookdale, because the way we've stepped the building back along that narrow portion, and at the end on Brookdale, they couldn't get access to the roof from Brookdale. So we all agreed that the Grand Avenue access for vehicular and for placement of the fire truck access made the most sense. And here you can see that on Grand Avenue, that long rectangle is the outline of the fire ladder truck. And their requirement is they can't be any farther than 30 feet away from the face of the building or any closer than 15. Because of the unusually wide right-of-way on Grand, which used to be a very wide street before it was cut off by 101, we have a lot of frontage in the right of way, and the curb line is pretty far out in Grand Avenue. So to get to that 30-foot distance between where we can have the fire truck, and we did pull the curb line in a bit, but we had to move the whole building closer to the Grand Avenue frontage. And that's why we ended up with our very small setback to the property line. But when you look at the setback related to the curb, there's quite a distance there. There's 30 feet to the fire truck. So that's what drives our placement of the building and how it affected the front yard setback. Grand is our front yard. Then on Lincoln Avenue, the required setback is 10 feet. We're providing 3 feet along the section where the cafe is and the lobby to provide a more direct visual connection to the sidewalk and articulate that elevation in the sidewalk. The only portion that we're projecting into that 10-foot setback is this ground floor for the lobby and the cafe. The rest of the building at the Brookdale end is at the 10-foot setback, and all the upper floors are at the 10-foot setback. Then I want to talk about the lot coverage. So that slight increase in the lot coverage allowed us to step back the upper floors on the Brookdale end of the building to respect the scale of existing residential on Brookdale. We've stepped that end of the building back, which is at the far end in this image. And you can see from the image here that if you didn't realize where the property line was on the end of the building that's on Grand on the left in this picture, it looks like there's even a larger than 15-foot setback. So the apparent setback, if you look at the setback from the curb and what we've added in landscaping in the right of way, I think respects the intent of the building placement and setbacks. And what we're doing along Lincoln for the cafe and the lobby, I think helps invigorate and engage the sidewalk along that elevation. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Tom Holloway from Kla Landscape Design to talk about the landscape features.
Hi guys, nice. Thanks again for hearing us today. I think the important thing that I wanted to stress is what's probably already been stressed a couple times already, is just that Grand Avenue frontage with the curb line being so far away. You can see that we really do wind up with quite a bit more landscape on the frontage than the narrow setback would lead you to believe. So the landscape ties in very nicely with the architecture in terms of how it's kind of distributed around the site. We do have some relatively generous landscape along the Grand Avenue side, which provides some screening for the driveway entry into the building and really starts to focus the attention towards the corner entry. One of the comments that came out of the DRB previously was to consider using species alternate than the Canary Island date palms. We're showing alternate species. One of the things we would like to chat with you guys about today is if you're willing to consider allowing us to use the Canary Island palms in this location, just because it's not directly adjacent to native lands. There's already a bunch of Canary Island palms that are out there, and it seems like it'll fit the location quite well. So just want to get clarification from you on that, if we can potentially use those Canary Island palms. And they really kind of help to set scale for the building and tie it into the existing landscape to the residences to the east. But as we wrap around the building where the cafe gets a little bit closer to the sidewalk, we do have a narrow strip of landscape along that edge with some upright plants to articulate. Then we've got the cafe space, and we are saving one of the existing trees that's part of the nursery. It happens to be sitting right in that area and works really nice to be able to save that tree. The cafe wraps around it with the tables under it. It'll be a really cool feature for that cafe. And the relationship of the cafe to the sidewalk is really important because it really helps to energize the space and provide a good connection between the outdoor cafe and the indoor and the sidewalk. As we move to the south towards Brookdale, the landscape spaces around the building get a little more generous. So we do have layers of landscaping that include our stormwater treatment area, but then also shrubs and grasses between the building and the stormwater treatment. And then the far south end off the Brookdale frontage, we have it's called a pet patio. But really, it's an additional patio for guests to be able to use and have their pets out there. And then the last thing that I really wanted to touch on is we do have the small patio up on the second floor above the cafe. So this patio that you see in the upper right corner fits right over the top of the cafe below. And it's just a small space for guests of the hotel to be able to go out and enjoy and look over the street and kind of see what's going on. Nicole, I think the next slide is the one that Crystal already talked about. But again, the main thing is that while we are slightly short in landscape within our setback, we have provided additional landscape outside the setback to more than make up for that space. And this exhibit does a really good job of showing that. And I think lastly, I'm going to turn it. These are just some images. The cafe in the upper left corner, our dog/guest patio that's on the Brookdale frontage is over here on the upper right. You can see the trellis up on the upper floor in the lower left. And the lower right. That's the second floor patio. So with that, I will turn it back over to Bob.
I'm going to just
Thank you,
let
Tom.
you know you're over your 10 minutes. So if you could wrap it up, that would be awesome. But I do want you to present everything.
Okay, we'll try to go through the rest quickly. We don't have that much more to go. For the signage, we are proposing 2 blade signs at the corner of Lincoln Avenue and Grand Avenue, vertical blade signs. We think that it's in character with the building. We also have a sign, excuse me, in the window in the at the lobby hotel entrance. Again, fitting in with the character of the architecture that we're trying to present here. So these are our signage locations. This is a close-up of that window sign. So we think that what we're proposing is subdued and appropriate to the building. And I think with that, out of respect to the time we have here, I think with that, we can I think be open for any questions you may have at this point.
I have a few, if I could start.
Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
Can we pull up 8AH, sheet A8, and you can explain to us how you arrived at 62% coverage? Because again, it looks like all the gray area to the north of the building that's in the city right away is being used as, uncovered, undeveloped space. Is that true?
Yeah, no, we did not include the right of way on Grand in that coverage calculation for the, I think it was 62%.
So the 62% is only within the property lines?
Within the property lines.
Okay. Hard to see that visually. It looks like it's way more than 62%. And then my other questions are for the landscape architect. And the first question is, can you talk a little bit about your stormwater management? I assume the gravel area on the east side is used as permeable, qualifies as permeable paving. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct. Up against
And-
the residential, that's all permeable.
And is there any place else on the site where you've used permeable paving?
We're looking at down by the dog patio, utilizing that. But for the most part, the rest of the paving is impervious.
So it looks like the brick paving, most of that's outside of your property, so that even if that was permeable, that wouldn't help you.
Correct.
So if you did the dog patio, you might be able to reduce a little bit of your bioretention along Lincoln?
Yeah, it would be a minimal amount. In fact, it probably wouldn't even change the size of what we've got here, just because it would be such an insignificant difference.
Got it. Can you talk a little bit about the specific trees you use in specific areas? You have a plant palette. You know, and it's one of those where I look at it, I think, well, some of those trees might be inappropriate for certain areas, but so it'd be nicer to get it a little more specific than could be one of these 3 trees or one of these 4 trees.
Sure. Well, again, at the Grand Avenue frontage, we would very much like to use the Canary Island date palm. But if that isn't acceptable to DRB, then we're looking at using smaller flowering trees like a desert willow or a saucer magnolia, but still get a relatively decent size, 25 feet plus or minus 15 feet wide, to be able to accentuate the entry. The street trees all need to be relatively small and low because of the overhead power lines. So we're looking at things like a crepe myrtle or an eastern red bud, or potentially the flowering magnolia, the saucer magnolia. And then at the far south end on the Brookdale frontage, we want the trees to be relatively narrow and not too big. So in that location, we're really leaning more towards the Melaleuca or the Brachychiton, which is the bottle tree or the paper bark tree.
Yeah, I know that.
But we haven't finalized on it yet.
Okay, just curious. Sometimes it's good to be more specific on some of these plans.
Sure.
And then the street trees, they may have to go through this. The city used to have the Parks Department. I think the Parks Director used to have to approve street trees. So just so you know that.
Okay.
Okay, that's it for me. Thanks. Oh, I do have one more question. On the cafe, is the cafe intended just for hotel guest use, or is that something?
No, and Marcello can talk to that a little bit more, but the
Right,
idea
that's not
with the
yours.
cafe is that, of course, it's servicing the hotel guests, but it's also a nice, convenient amenity for the neighborhood as well to come in and get a cup of coffee, bite to eat, that sort of thing. Is that correct, Marcello?
Yeah, that's correct. We envision it more as being an amenity for the hotel guests that we need to provide. And we like to open it up to the neighborhood. We don't want it to be like closed. We don't envision people from any distance coming to the cafe, but we don't want to close it off to the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me. Thanks.
Sure.
Any other questions from staff to the applicant? No?
I have a few questions.
Oh, Sarah, go ahead.
Can we go back to the color and material boards? Yeah, so I felt like when I looked at the elevation, I saw a lot of what I'm hoping is the futon color. But can you talk about where some of these darker, like the brevity brown color, where that's occurring on the elevations? I saw some like wood elements, which would be that first, decorative bracket color, but I wasn't seeing a lot of brown walls. So I'm just kind of wondering where that comes into the palette, because it looks light and bright on the rendering. So I wanted a little bit more conversation around that. I think that's probably a question for the architect.
Sure. And Nicole, can you bring up one of the rendering images And Nicole, can you walk through the placement of the colors that we put on the building?
Yeah, so you're correct that futon is the primary, the light color. And then the brevity brown is mainly to mimic areas where we had the metal. So the metal accents here, I'll pull up our elevations.
So it's not stucco painted brown, it's like metal painted brown.
Yeah, so it's kind of just in these areas where we have some green screen panels that are using that anodized aluminum. We wanted a plaster color behind it to kind of make the metal green screen panel disappear so that the plants kind of stood out more on the building. That's where that's used. It's not really used in very many places. It's only the green screen here, and then there's 2 over on the refuge side as well.
Okay, so is that like recessed kind of? Does it look
Yeah,
like-
so there's a recessed little archway here. We'll conceal that green screen panel, kind of mimicking our archways for the storefronts on the ground floor as well, carrying that theme across our base of our building.
Okay, and then can you talk a little bit about the anodized aluminum, medium bronze? Is that all of the storefront? Is that color, and what else maybe?
The storefront, the windows, and the awnings, and then as well as the signage frames. So kind of any accent metals. We're also proposing that the downspouts and gutters be that as well, so that they kind of blend in with the fascia that we're using and the brackets that we're using as well.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. My other question is on the site plan, maybe more for the landscape architect or on the ground level plan. Along the kind of the main elevation on Lincoln, you know, there are selective trees kind of allocated across the site. You know, I'm wondering if there was any consideration, because there's a lot of pedestrian jaywalking, I guess I would say, that occurs on this street. Was there any consideration about a parkway, like more planting along Lincoln? It still seems very hardscape oriented, and I'm just wondering what the thought was there.
Yeah, we had looked at that. We've got the parallel parking that happens on Lincoln Avenue. So that would require someone to walk across the parkway strip. And with a water efficient landscape ordinance, we can't do lawn in those narrow spaces. And for being water wise, we don't like to do that anyway. So it really became more of a kind of looking at the function of the space and how it's going to be used, that we felt that having the full width sidewalk made more sense. Our tree wells, where we do have the trees, it's not a tree grate or just a bark covered area. We actually have shrubs in there to create like a box at the base of the tree, so that visually that starts to break up the space a little bit more. And I think the other thing too, if I remember right, Public Works wanted that to be the full 10-foot wide sidewalk in that area. Could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that was one of their requirements or requests.
So is the stormwater off that hardscape going into the tree wells?
No, it would just, that would be just sloped towards the curb.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions?
That was it.
Anyone else? Just a follow-up, Tom, the sidewalk is 10 feet wide,
Yes,
and that was at the request of the Public Works?
I believe so. I'm putting a big caveat on that. My recollection is that's what it was, but it's been several months, so.
Are the other sidewalks in that area along Lincoln that wide?
I'm going to look. I thought the one in front of the Villa Inn is wide as well. Let me go look.
Yes, a lot of them are that wide. The one in front of the villa for sure. Some do narrow, but a lot of them are that wide on this side of the street.
Thanks, Marcello.
Sure.
Any other questions of the applicant on the board? then let's open it up to public comments. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak on this matter?
So if you wish to speak and you are calling in by phone, please dial *9. Otherwise, use the raise your hand icon, and you will have 3 minutes to speak. And if you are wrapping up, I won't cut you off, but if you go over, I'll kind of let you know to wrap up. And the first person is, hold on. Amy and Joe Clickover. And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Leslie. Yes, Amy Lykover, Gerstle Park. I wanted to answer Sarah Reggi's question about where the expression tunnel effect came from. It's actually, well, not that expression. This phenomenon is described in both the 2020 general plan and the 2040 general plan in the neighborhood element. And I quote, where development occurs, all right, this is in Lincoln San Rafael Hill, landscape setbacks and tree planting should be required to visually reduce the wall effect along Lincoln Avenue. So yeah, that's whatever it is, 20 years of work that has gone into that. And I really recommend that this be looked at again in order to satisfy the requirements of the general plan. I have a question. Are those signs neon? And you can answer that when I'm done. I'm also very concerned, as I mentioned, about setbacks. They soften the hardscape, and you already have the wall effect, right? So without the proper setbacks, it really is very wall-like, especially along Lincoln Avenue. And I mean, consider as nice as it is to have a cafe. I couldn't tell whether there's a door that opens to Lincoln, but consider if you were to have a proper setback, you could actually have an outdoor cafe down there, and you could have much more landscaping, which is what I'm sure the neighbors there would prefer. It is a slippery slope going from 50 to 48, when in fact 50 would be visually so much more appealing and is what's required in the general plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
Next is, I apologize if I get your name wrong, Bhagya Bakshi. And you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I just wanted to understand what the noise level implications are going to be as far as that. I thought I heard that you guys said there is there's a lift that's going to be used to park the cars for the hotel. I'm not sure if I heard that correctly or not. And then what has the city done, or what's the city going to plan on about the traffic implications that's going to bring on Lincoln Avenue already? When there's a traffic jam or an accident on 101, a lot of people that want access to downtown Santa Fe start to use Lincoln Avenue, and the residents that live out here have to find other ways just to get to their houses. Are the city planning on putting a light there? Because turning left, if you're going towards downtown from 101, is going to create a havoc for traffic, not only just for the residents, but for anybody who's trying to use Lincoln is to go over there. So that's the second question. And the third question is for the owners of the property. What are their plans for Villa Inn? What's going to happen there? Is that something they can share with us, or are they going to keep Villa Inn the way it is, or is this new property going to somehow take over for all the other stuff that's going on around Villa Inn? I think those are my most of my questions, and really don't have any comments at this point.
Thank you, Bhagya. Next up is Patty or Patricia Truskler. You have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, excellent. Hi there. I have owned a third floor condo since 1978. And I bought the condo because of the hills, Dominican hills, that have been my view for all these years. The traffic over these years I have watched increase, continually increase, and my next door neighbor is no longer living because she was walking in the crosswalk and a speeding car mowed her down in the crosswalk, and within a year she was dead. The congestion is already awful. The speeding is not, it's bad. Plus the fact this building is going to completely block my view and crush my property value. I am adamantly opposed to this building. I was a buyer of Sunnyside nursery items. I have eaten once at the Villa Inn, and there are a lot of us over here in the Oaks condominiums that are not pleased with this proposal. So I thank you for allowing me to speak my piece.
Thank you, Patricia. And I just want to remind attendees who are speaking, you're bringing up many very valid points, and I hope that the DRB will be responding to many of the questions regarding design review. Many of the questions related to traffic are definitely valid as well, but I do encourage you to bring that to the Planning Commission when this goes to planning commissions, because those are the topics that will be kind of more evaluated under the Planning Commission purview than design review. Next up is Nina Lillanthal Murphy. And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Leslie. My name is Nina Lillanthal Murphy. I am a 40-year resident, co-founder of the Lincoln San Rafael Hill Neighborhood Association and current president. The developers are always pushing to maximize return and minimize investment to the detriment of the significant impact this project will have on the quality of life for the existing residents. Let's focus on the tax-paying residents who have to live with this proposal. Water. What's the projected water use for this proposed hotel? And what is the current usage for the villa? The guests and the visitors who come into San Rafael are getting a lot of our water while we're sitting here, all the residents are sitting here conserving. This is the driest year since 1924, and the outlook for rain does not look good for California. It was stated that today on the news. All the buildings on the east side of Lincoln Avenue are 1 or 2 stories. This is going to stick out like a sore thumb. And again, we do not want a tunnel effect, as Amy suggested there. It is not good. No one wants that, a bunch of tall buildings. We don't need more traffic on Lincoln Avenue, and we don't have any parking on Lincoln Avenue. We would prefer actually to see a facelift for the Villa Inn, as opposed to proposing another hotel right next door to the existing one. Is it not enough to have one hotel? It fits in beautifully with our neighborhood, and we really like it. I have a couple of questions here. Where are the deliveries going to be made? On Grand Avenue, on Lincoln Avenue? Definitely not Brookdale. The cafe is, how many is going to be seated on that cafe? And the entrance, did Bob, the architect, say that it was only a 6-foot setback, or did I mishear him? I'm not sure. I think this proposal would be very bad for our neighborhood. It's, again, too tall. Residents will lose their views. Their property values will plummet. As Patty said, I mean, this is just unacceptable. I feel like we're turning our neighborhood into a ghetto, and I don't like it at all. As a 40-year resident, this is not what we paid for when we came into this town. Wow. And so we're going to have a little pet area, which is kind of nice, but at the same time, we might have barking dogs all the time. So who knows? The windows, I have a question about the windows. You said they were glazed, that the guests can see out, but the residents cannot see in. Is that correct? I'm not really sure about that either. I think this is a bad proposal for Lincoln Avenue. I think the building is more than sufficient enough to take all the guests we need. And we also have another hotel going up in downtown, and also in Terra Linda, we have a, they're everywhere. We don't need another one. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Next up is David Hampton. David Hampton, you have 3 minutes.
Hello, thank you. Good evening. I appreciate you holding this meeting this evening. My wife and I are local homeowners along Lincoln Avenue, only a couple blocks from this proposed project. And we walk by the old Sloat Garden Center frequently. And although we do support some type of, development there, we do share similar concerns voiced by other neighbors that this isn't the right type of commercial building that should be built there. We have concerns over the height, the size, of course, the traffic. And our question would, to the owner would be, why are you investing this capital into a new, larger hotel and not renovating the existing one that you have across the street already? And so as homeowners in the area, we are concerned about it, as already voiced by other people. And at the moment, from what we've seen during the presentation, we are opposed to it. But thank you for your time, and we'll take our answer, later. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you, David. If anyone else would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand using the raise the hand icon at the bottom of the screen if you hover over it. Or if you are phoning in, please dial *9. And I see no one else wishing to comment.
More, Leslie? Okay, then we're going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. First, to ask any follow-up questions of staff or the applicant. Does anyone have any questions? Sharon.
Hi, I did some quick calculations, and I think that number is wrong, the lot coverage number. I would like staff to perhaps check the numbers. It seems to me that it's higher than what is noted here.
Any other questions? Yeah. Or the applicant?
Oh, for the applicant, sorry.
Either. Any other questions? No. Okay. Then let's have the board comment. And Sharon, why don't you start with your comments on the design issues that are before us tonight?
Yeah, I think that the setback allowance on Grand Avenue it's not a problem because of that large right of way, but the setback on Lincoln, I really think encroaches on the public land, and it brings that building right up. And also I think that 2-foot strip is going to be very hard to keep. I mean, Jeff, you can comment, to keep looking nice with a planting. I think that has to get pushed back. It's too crowded. I think also it seems like it's overbuilt. There's, we don't talk to parking, but there's not even a parking spot for every room, let alone staff and, people visiting the cafe so I just wonder if the room count is the right thing for this lot. I think that's all I have.
Thank you. How about you, Jeff? Comments? You have to unmute yourself, Jeff.
Yeah, that's what I'm in the process of doing, Larry. I only do this like twice a month, so this is a real struggle for me. Apologize.
Struggle for all of us.
So, I think it's one of these projects where there's some land use questions here that are kind of big, and this might have been one of those instances where it might have been nice to have the PC look at it before we do, before we drill down on some of the, the design minutia. But here we are, and I did have the opportunity to see this as a conceptual review a while ago, and at that time, I thought it was a fairly handsome building, and I understand some of the questions the neighbors have, but some of these aren't some of the ones we're going to be answering tonight. There were some minor improvements to the entryway, and I still think it's a fairly handsome project. And I mean, the only thing I have really is the palm trees, and I know the board really hates to listen to me talk about this, but I'm not even sure MMWD is even approving palm trees anymore because they've been deemed invasive plants. City and the county is spending a lot of money removing palm trees from open space, and even though you're not immediately adjacent to open space, you're really not that far away. I mean, birds could easily consume the seed and spread it around. And I know there's already palms in the neighborhood, but I don't think we should exasperate it. Generally speaking, palms, they don't provide much shade. They don't provide much experience at the pedestrian level. They don't provide any habitat for wildlife. And they are invasive. So I think it's pretty easy for you to come up with a replacement tree for that. And that's not that big a deal for you. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Jeff. How about you, Sarah?
So I don't have any comments on the palm trees. I'll leave that to Jeff. I think in looking at staff's recommendation, the signage and, kind of what's in our purview, I agree with, I think it was Sharon or Jeff's comment that a lot of the land use issues aren't really something that, we're meant to comment on. So those can be taken up further with planning. In terms of the signage, I think, it seemed appropriate on the scale of the elevation. I don't have any issues with what was proposed, although it does need a variance. The setbacks, I definitely agree that the grand side, because of that large right-of-way, is no issue. My issue on Lincoln is more that I feel like because of, considerations for pedestrian safety, I'd like to see more of a parkway approach with some crossovers from the parking cars versus so much pavement. And I think that could help with stormwater management on site versus, dumping it into the more regional system. But that's a pretty minor comment along that frontage. When I looked at, I don't think I was at the meeting last year. I don't remember seeing this, but the photo simulations that were provided, the kind of renderings that popped the building in, and those are on page, I think, 19 of the architect's package. It doesn't appear to have that tunneling effect that's been discussed. There's many large trees on the other side of the street that are of a similar scale. So I feel like the setback as proposed, I don't have any issues with that. More about the landscaping and the pedestrian experience. And then the landscaping I talked about a little bit, the lot coverage, I agree. I don't really understand the calculation, so it'd be good to have that confirmed. And then in terms of the overall design, I think the tower elements at the front are pretty successful. The variance from 54 to 55.9, I'm not totally sure that's necessary. Could it be achieved within the allowable height? It seems like that may be achievable and non-impactful to the overall design. So that might be a challenge for the design team. I think there are some opportunities for where the niches are to kind of further articulate the facade. Some of those were layered in. I think that is successful, and there might be further opportunities to continue that in some of the more blank areas on the building. I know this isn't on our list of things to comment on. I think the pet area is really weird. Like, I just don't know. I haven't seen a lot of those in hotels. I think it's I don't know, it seems like a maintenance challenge and an issue. So I wonder, like kind of what program that is responding to, and if that's really, you want to consolidate it all in one area, or if that could be better served as, another amenity area for the guests. But that's kind of just my personal thoughts on pet areas. So I think that's it for me.
Thank you. How about you, Stuart?
I'm good. Yeah, the pet area always made me wonder if it's because of service animals or who knows what they're probably required as far as we know. But yeah, I wonder, I question the successful nature of those things. Anyways, I was on the subcommittee and saw this as a conceptual item as well as Jeff. And I do remember it well. And we liked the building at that time, and I do like the building today. I think it's a really well-designed building. And if we're sticking to the design issues, which the traffic, the parking, all these other things in the general plan, I think are more appropriate for the planning commission. So I'm just talking about the design of the building. I think it's been successful. I'm not going to get into the palm tree wars. I'll let Larry and Jeff have those, and we'll see where that lands. But I think they responded. I am in agreement with the setback variance because for the most part, the building obeys the variance along Lincoln, and the part that juts out is actually that lower portion of the building, which steps back after that. And given the difficulty of that site, which is kind of where we make the findings for variances, that site's really tight in those areas. So I think it does lend itself to variance, particularly with the reasonably large sidewalk. So normally I'm actually very sensitive to the tunnel thing and the pedestrian experience. I felt on conceptual review and this review that it's actually successful in achieving that. I can support the signage. I think it's a little bit of a throwback look. And in terms of use, it's a pretty small boutique hotel. So, I'm not so concerned with I don't think it's going to have the user impacts, I believe, that the public might be concerned at, but that's certainly just an opinion. Just building wise, I like it. So I'm going to just be consistent with the initial review, and I like the way it's going.
Thanks, Stuart. Well, I'll wade into the palm tree forest. I like the palm trees. I think they're appropriate in this particular place. There's a lot of them in the area, and this particular style of architecture seems to blend well with palm trees. They are low water usage plants that also have fairly small root balls and might work in some of the areas where we have minimal landscaping depths. Talking about the Lincoln frontage, well, first of all, I'd like to compliment the architect. I think they've done a great job. They've designed a very handsome building. It's well articulated in massing and setbacks and stepbacks and voids and solids. The one thing I would criticize about that, and I would encourage them to explore, is I think one of the things that came out of the conceptual review, which most of us were not a part of, and I think that has got its own limitations there, was that the architects have done such a great job on articulating large portions of the building, yet there are blank walls, the stucco blank walls with just punched openings, I think fail to really evoke that Mediterranean mission style of detailing that would be more appropriate in this particular location. It would also help perhaps to give a little more scale and beauty to this building, because there are some very large walls on Lincoln Avenue. And if they're going to be that close to the sidewalk, I think you want to have a little better relationship to the pedestrian experience. Even though the ground floor brick facade works well with pedestrians, as soon as they look up, they're going to see a blank wall with these punched openings. So, some belly bands or some additional detailing around the windows or some architectural ornamentation, I think, would help in some cases. particularly on the eastern elevation, which faces the freeway, I would encourage that. I know that you've done some of that as far as planting these fake windows and ornamentation on it. I don't think it's been very successful. I think you need to go a little further in that, and also perhaps break up that long eastern wall again, like you did on the western wall, with some kind of vertical articulation, and also a change in color or material, because it's going to be seen from the freeway, and it's kind of like the back side of the building. So I think we need to, consider it a little more as a four-sided architectural structure that's going to stick out in the neighborhood. Getting back to the front end, I think someone brought up the idea that the color palette doesn't seem to show a very strong differentiation between those three-story walls above the ground floor. And there seems like a slight color variation, but not enough for me anyway. I think that would help kind of break up the mass a little bit more. It's kind of an architectural trick, but it works. When I look at the western elevation, I think let me pull it up. It's successful on the northern side more so than anywhere else, because you've got that. Let me pull up I guess I'm looking at the first. Yeah, the first sheet, where you have the drawing index. It looks very handsome, except at the northern side, you've got the kind of story and a half, two-story brick articulation, and then you've got a setback with the tile roof at the second floor where the patio is, and then from there south, it's all basically a three-story unrelieved wall with very little articulation. So I'm thinking that maybe you might be able to introduce a horizontal element somewhere in line with that tile roof over, I guess that's the boardroom, that would again further articulate this building on the Lincoln side, so that it looks like it's a one-story brick facade set back with a one-story balcony, and then there are two more stories above that. I think that would break up the mass a little bit more and help mitigate the pedestrian experience on that sidewalk. Looking at that elevation, I would not be in favor of the signage exception. I don't think you need two blade signs so close to each other on the corner. And I think that one blade sign would be enough on the Lincoln Avenue elevation, or you could put one on an angle on the corner if that's doable for you. But there's not a lot of traffic on Grand to be attracting that by that sign, so I don't really see the need for it. Let's see what else I had to comment on. Oh, I'm a little surprised that the Department of Public Works has recommended keeping the wide sidewalk. I think that it would, if we're going to have to, I guess I go back to, I don't think that this side setback on Lincoln Avenue is enough. Now, maybe it doesn't need to be 10 feet, but it could be pulled back a little bit. I think the architects are sharp enough that they can start sharpening their pencil and making the lobby and the cafe work a little better. And if they can't pull the entire facade, the ground floor facade back, to at least do some of it, like they did where that recess is, where the cafe, I guess, is. That if it could be pulled back, say at the northwest corner, where the entrance is, that starts helping so that it's not this unrelieved, I don't know what, 80-foot long wall along the pedestrian sidewalk. The other thought I had was that if that can't be done, could the sidewalk be narrow? It doesn't seem like we would need a 10-foot wide sidewalk there. And then ask the applicant to landscape part of what they lose in the sidewalk, so that if we could get another 2 or 3 feet out of the sidewalk that could be landscaped, that would kind of mitigate not having the full side yard setback. So those are the things that I would suggest be considered. Going back to what I first said, I think this is a very handsome design for the building. It does seem to be more appropriately located in the downtown area. If it was in the downtown area, I would not have a problem with it at all, but this is outside of the downtown area, and it's a little more neighborhood, like almost like a suburban neighborhood, although it's not a suburban neighborhood, it's an urban neighborhood, but it's not downtown urban. And so it seems like there needs to be a little more consideration of how it fits into the neighborhood. I don't have a problem with the height. It seems a little silly that you're asking for an extra 9 inches on a 54-foot height when you could just easily bring that down to 54 feet. I will say something, I don't understand the parking, how that is going to work. First of all, if you're required to have 50 spaces and you're only providing 38, and I think, what is it, nine or how many of them are provided by this lift? How is that lift going to work with these hotel guests? Are you going to have an attendant, or is this going to all be automatic? And if it is automatic, are the guests going to understand how to do it? So it seems like there's a lot of stuff going on here, and it's been really shoehorned into this site. And it could work if all these problems are solved, but I don't think they're all been solved just yet. So I think there needs to be another go round of thought and design put into this thing before it is ready for prime time, in my case, but that's just my opinion. So, Leslie, do we have some consensus items?
No, not too many. But I will kind of pull out the items that I heard, and then similar to our last meeting, you can kind of, duke it out whether they're consensus. So what I've heard a little bit that it's packed in there, maybe a little bit too much packed in. I've heard from 2 folks that the tower element really doesn't need the height exception, that it could fit within the allowable height, that the setback on Grand Street is not an issue. Mixed about the Lincoln Street setback, and I think the one consensus is that the pedestrian experience on Lincoln Street is not ideal, and that could be improved. And whether that includes increased, like a smaller sidewalk with increased landscaping on the right-of-way, which could be a recommendation to discussion with Public Works, because of course neither you nor the Planning Commission approves what is on the right-of-way, as well as additional articulation to break up the kind of the blank walls and to provide more pedestrian experience. There is opposite views on the palm trees. There's an absolute yes and an absolute no, and everyone else chose to stay silent. There is also a difference of opinion on the signage, with some thinking the signage exception is appropriate and some saying that it is not. There's pretty much consensus that it's a handsome building. There is, partially within DRB purview, is the pet area necessary? Is it a good idea? Can it be better utilized as a different amenity? So I think that's what I have highlighted. You're on mute. You are still on mute.
Larry, you're muted.
See, Jeff,
There you
you
go.
have a hard time. Some of these issues that were yes and no on, maybe we could take a vote on and just try and get that clear. Like, for example, the signage. How does everybody feel about the signage? Is it appropriate? And we should support an exception to it, or is it not?
I personally like the opposing blade signs. I think it's kind of a real classic look, personally. I'm not opposed to it. Let's put it that way.
Sarah?
Yeah, I agree with Stuart. I think it kind of is like this, it has a little bit of a nod to the past that I think is appropriate for the development.
Sarah? I'm Sharon. I'm sorry.
Sharon, I don't think it's necessary. I think one sign on Lincoln would be plenty.
And Jeff?
I like the signage.
Okay, so that's a recommendation for approval of the sign exception. Is that correct? Leslie? We have consensus.
Yeah, that was 3 who were fine with it out of.
Yeah, that's a recommendation for. What else?
Okay.
What else were we at?
The next one were the palm trees, but I'll let you, like I say, I'm going to stay out of that one.
She's new to this, isn't she? For the public, the opposing palm tree views on this board are legendary.
Well, we know where Jeff stands.
I totally understand why you're doing it, but I still think there are better choices. And you're looking for, a columnar plant and an accent plant, and there's better choices in palm trees. And again, I don't think you may not get that plant approved through MMWD anyway. Like I said, my understanding is they deem that plant to be invasive, which it is. And like I said, the city and the county is spending a lot of money to try to get these volunteer palm plants out of our open space. And I don't support anything that exasperates that situation.
Canary Island palms are really nice though, Jeff. But Sharon, how do you?
If they weren't a weed, you'd be right.
Sharon?
I'm against the palm trees. I think we should do a native plant, and we should, follow the city's rules.
And Sarah?
I feel like I don't have the expertise in the palm tree arena. I think they look nice in the renderings, but if they're an invasive species, we should look for an alternate that's more appropriate.
And Stuart?
I would agree with Sarah that, and I know it's almost a non-answer, non-committal. I like the way they look with this building. I think they look really like they almost belong with this building. I don't have the expertise on what's going on with the species and differing views. So, I mean, I would say that if staff finds that they are invasive and not approvable, that they need to seek another species that achieves the goal of that signature. I guess we need a palm tree seminar.
Well, then that sounds like it's a punt. We're punting.
Well, I think Sarah and I are in the same boat. It's just like.
It sounds like what you're saying though is that if it was not invasive, or if it is not on some kind of a list, that you'd be okay with it.
From a design standpoint, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we've kind of got a stalemate there. So.
Well, we cancel each other out.
Oh, I see. Well, then you're saying there's.
I don't know, Sarah. Is that a yes or a no? I mean, if we're discussing it.
I feel like my answer is approved unless deemed invasive.
Okay, I'll go with that.
Knows more.
All right. So is that enough for you to go on, Leslie?
Yes.
Okay.
Palm trees are fine unless deemed invasive otherwise.
Okay, great.
So who's going to determine whether or not they're invasive or not?
Not
Jeff.
you.
I have a feeling you'll be at the planning commission meeting, Jeff.
Yeah. It might be at the plan commission could always say, you know, they don't want palm trees.
Yeah, at some point we need to stop having this conversation. That's all I gotta say.
Okay.
Can I just jump in really quick? I did just look up on MMWD's website and they do have an invasive plant list from 2010 and Canary Island palms are listed on there.
So it's out.
Well, there you go.
No palm trees.
And we'll recommend not providing them. Is that correct?
Correct.
That is
Okay. The next one, we were asked to opine on an exception to the maximum allowable lot coverage.
I'll jump in and say as calculated and presented to us by staff that I am okay with it. If I think it needs to be vetted out based on the concern of a few board members, we didn't sit there and calculate it ourselves, but it would appear there's some question about the calculations.
Yeah.
So I'm in support of it as calculated. But if we find the calculations are wrong, then there's a problem.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, who calculated the lot coverage?
The architect, right?
Did the staff check it?
Yeah, I was looking at that as we were going through discussions, and I do want to apologize because I did make a mistake. So I double checked the ordinance for what counts as lot coverage. And it does look like they are over 62. So it's actually at 75% currently, which is the 13,343 building footprint divided by the lot coverage is at 75%. So I do think that is something that we're going to need to take a look at again, because the exception only allows up to a 10% lot coverage exceedance through that entitlement process. Otherwise, it would have to go through a variance. So there is still a path forward. However, yeah, so I do apologize for that miscalculation on my end.
Okay.
Well, it's, you know,
you're saying it's more likely 75% lot coverage?
Correct. And I think maybe what happened is that when the applicant did the lot coverage calculations, it does include part of that public right-of-way space. And lot coverage is obviously, like we mentioned at the beginning, towards the beginning of the hearing, lot coverage is what's actually on within the property boundaries, not the public right-of-way. So that's where the 62% came from.
So I'm assuming that the lot coverage, well, there's two things. The lot coverage is as you've seen the plans. So I know it makes a difference, and it's good you all noted it so we can get this settled out and have it accurate by the time it goes to Planning Commission. So assuming lot coverage is closer to 75%, as opposed to what, 63? Yet the plan, obviously the site plan, the massing is still the same. So I don't know if that's too discordant for you guys to comment on the lot coverage as proposed, even if the number that you see is not quite known.
Larry, me? I mean, I'll speak out right now.
Go ahead.
I think that's such a massive discrepancy that I'm not sure how we could proceed with that item this evening, because it's going to have a significant change in the massing of this building. That's a big number. It's not like it was off by a few percent. It's off by 12%. That's on a building of this size. That's a lot. It could change the character of a ton on this building.
Yes.
This is Nicole Thompson with RYS. Sorry.
I don't think we're at the board level now.
Yeah, sorry. Apologies.
I agree with what Stuart said. I think that it's got to go back to the board, because I mean, their boards, the architects' boards, because this building can't be built like it's drawn now.
Well, it needs to be checked, that's for sure.
Sarah, how do you feel about it?
You know, I think I guess the struggle I'm having is that Grand Avenue perception is very different than the lot coverage because of that, you know, really large public right of way. So I guess I don't have, like I said earlier, concerns with the setback along Lincoln. So I think we need to know what that number is to consider it, but I'd like to see it within at least the allowable overage. So, you know, if 60% is allowable, we thought it was 62 and it's 75, it seems like it should be closer to 70. And to Stuart's point, that, you know, those percentage points have impact on a building of this size. So I'm a little conflicted.
Well, what I'm trying to get at is a poll, how people feel if that's the way the board feels, that a small discrepancy over the allowable lot coverage could be worked, then we can give direction to the architects to go back to the drawing board and do that. If it's felt that a larger discrepancy, such as a 75%, could be okay, as long as it's verified or confirmed, we need to give them that direction too. So, Jeff, how do you feel about it?
Well, I'm the first one that sort of brought it up, because when I look at it just visually without doing any math, it looked like about 75% to me. And that just feels a little bit like too big an exception to make for anybody.
So then to me, it sounds like the consensus is that it needs to be cut down in size to achieve a closer lot coverage number than to what it's allowed. And if it is over what is allowed, a much closer overage than what's currently there. Is that what the sense of the board is?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a direction that we can give the architects. There was another thing. Talking about that, we were asked about the minimum landscaping requirements from 50. Minimum landscaping requirements is 50%, and they're proposing 48%. How does everybody feel about that? Is that a problem or not? Jeff?
No, I'm not worrying about a couple of percent, but obviously if the lot coverage is 75%, then that has to be reduced, and you know, there's going to be some landscape opportunities there.
Thanks, Sarah.
Agree. I'm fine with the 2% reduction.
Sharon?
I'm fine if it's true, but I think now that we know that one number wasn't done right, we need to check all the numbers.
Okay, and Stuart?
Yeah, I would agree that it's okay. However, if the coverage is off and the building gets reduced, it sort of takes care of needing an exception for the landscaping. So I would like to see it comply if the coverage gets reduced.
Okay.
Okay.
And let's see, what was there?
Sir Paul, did you have a opinion on that one too?
Pardon me?
What was your vote on the landscape?
Oh, I didn't have a problem with the only 2% overage, but I think, like everybody said, if the 2% was because of we got a 75% lot coverage, if that gets reduced, I think it's because they're going to automatically come back into the 50% or even more. The other question was the reduction in the front and side setbacks, the Grand Avenue and the Lincoln Avenue setbacks. Stuart, how do you feel about it?
I'm okay with them. Again, though, if the coverage is over, I mean, we're gonna have this recurring theme. If we find the coverage is over and they have to reduce the building, the logical spot to probably get some relief would be along Lincoln Avenue.
Okay, Sharon?
Yeah, I agree. I have a problem with the Lincoln. It's too encroaching. I would want it back.
Okay, Sarah?
Yeah, I agree with Stuart.
And Jeff?
I agree.
And I agree too. I think if there's going to be a reduction, I mean, Grand Avenue setback is much better than what the Lincoln one is right now. So if there's going to be a reduction in the massing, take it out of the Lincoln setback. Was there anything else, Leslie, that we need to comment on?
Well, as the design review board, I was hoping that you could comment on actually some of the comments you made about some of the design. And again, you are right that this may change if the coverage goes down, but in terms of additional articulation, materials, colors to break up the massing, if you wanted to provide more direction on that, or if you need consensus on that, or, you know.
Yeah. Well, let's take a poll on that one. Sharon, do you have any concerns about the architectural design that you could?
I agree that it needs a little bit more, and there's a lot of colors on the color board that aren't really used. And so it's really, it could use more articulation. I agree the windows look punched, and the brick on the ground floor probably be really nice. And then up above, it's gonna look like Drive It or something. So that's a negative.
Oh, we have to Drive It.
Yeah.
And Jeff.
I'll let the architects do the heavy lifting on this one.
Thanks. Sarah.
I actually asked about the colors because when I saw the color board, it appeared very dark, but in the renderings, the building appears light and bright, which I like. So I like the subtle differentiation of the volumes and the metal all being painted, you know, the same color. So I don't have any concerns with the color palette and the way it's being applied. I wasn't totally sure I was following you, Larry, on your articulation questions. I think the elevator core that's on the corner of Lincoln and Grand is pretty blank. And so if some of that same, you know, articulation that was done on other parts of the building where privacy was a concern could be applied to that volume, I think that could be helpful. And also on the freeway side, I'm going to get my orientations wrong, but there is that kind of blank volume at the back of the project that I think some of that articulation, again, of the punched openings that's consistent with the remainder of the building could be applied, could help further articulate the building. But I didn't follow the horizontal articulation. I feel like the limited height and the way that the brick first layer is articulated is already breaking up the building significantly. So I wasn't really worried about any more horizontal articulation.
Okay, and Stuart.
Couldn't find the mute button. We're talking colors.
Well, we're talking colors and articulation and basically the architectural design. Do you think there's any?
I think the colors are appropriate for this style of building. You know, what they've tried to do here. It's really hard to do a kind of retro, do this kind of architecture and actually pull it off. And I think they're successful, given this style, much like the Aegis building was before they wrecked it down on the corner. So color-wise, I think it's fine. Articulation, again, for this style of building, it's appropriate for this style of building. So I'm fine with it. Although, again, it's going to change. I was just looking at the numbers on the coverage again, and they did say they had 72%. But even if they got the max 10% they're allowed, that's like 800, square feet of coverage of structure that needs to be removed, and that's just going to change. It's going to change everything. So I'm having a hard time moving forward on articulation and building shape and site on when I know that they could be fighting to cut 800 or 1,000 square feet of lot coverage out. It's going to change the building, possibly. Can Crystal kind of reiterate that 10% above the 60% base coverage is allowed, but then above that it becomes a variance?
Correct. Yeah. So there's a section in the zoning ordinance that allows for, and exceptions are actually able to be they can be processed administratively. However, because the entirety of the project is subject to planning commission review, that's why we were rolling the exception into it. So yes, they can go up to 10% with an exception. If you want to think of it kind of as a variance light, it has similar findings that have to be made. I think it's just a little bit easier to get there in terms of the findings to allow some flexibility. So they could go up to 70% with an exception. If they were trying to go above the 70%, which what I'm hearing is that the board would not be supportive of that, then it would go through a variance process.
Okay, so you're saying an additional 10%, not an additional 10% of the 60, but you can go from 60 to 70. Not
correct.
Like from 60 to 66. Okay.
Correct.
Yes. You're not saying 10%. You're not saying 6%.
Within 10%. So up to 10% can be approved under an exception.
Up to 10% additional or up to 10% of what's allowed?
That's my question. Yeah.
Yeah, up to 10% above what is allowed.
Well, then
Above what is allowed.
percent is allowed, so you're saying additional 6%. Is that
No,
correct?
that's what I thought too. She's saying that they can go from 60 to 70, not 60 to 66.
Oh, really? I read it as 66. That's not correct?
No, here, I can, would you like me to read the code section?
Yes.
Give me just 1 second to pull it up here.
That's an
I
important
apologize
distinction,
for-
actually.
It is, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's important for them to know too, because if they got to cut back from 75 to 66 versus just 70, that's almost double cutback.
Okay, so it says in any residential district, the maximum lot coverage may be increased by not more than 10% of the lot area, where such increases are necessary for significantly improved site planning or architectural design, creation or maintenance of views, or otherwise facilitate highly desirable features or amenities, and where such increases will not unreasonably affect abutting sites. So it's saying
Okay.
the maximum lot coverage, which would be whatever is allowed in the zoning district, may be increased by not more than 10%.
No, that was clear. 10% of the lot area. Okay.
Great.
But
Thank
it
you.
also then it conditions it upon basically exceptional circumstances.
So they might not, yeah, okay, got it.
And that would be decided by staff normally, but in this
Correct.
case, because it's going to planning commission, it's going to be taken up by them.
Yes, that's correct. So the zoning ordinance says that when a project has several different entitlements, the highest authority approves them all. So yes.
So that's going to be an issue for the applicants then when they go to planning commission, because these other issues are going to come out too from the neighborhood. I just want you to be aware that the neighborhood is going to bring up a lot of these issues again at the planning commission, and the planning commission is going to be responsible for responding to them and then considering them as to whether or not to grant an exception due to extraordinary circumstances. Be prepared for that. Okay. I think we've run this one all the
Yeah,
way.
I have one thing, sorry, that I didn't bring up before that I should have. That is it 2 or 3 story parking structure thing? Does that need some screening? Like that's somebody's house is right, I don't know how many feet away.
That's out of the building, isn't it?
Are you referring to the mechanical parking lift?
Yes.
It's within the building. It's screened by the building
Nobody
wall.
sees it.
It goes down a level. There's like a pit for the 3rd level of parking.
Oh, so it's only 1 floor of parking above grade.
Yeah, it's just
Okay.
it's just mechanical lifts like they have them in San Francisco.
Yeah, I just thought it started at grade and there'd be 2 stories of it. Okay.
Okay, so I think we've got all the consensus we can muster at this point. Would one of the board members like to make a motion on this project? Sounds like it's something that needs to be continued.
Oh, yeah. Leslie, can you briefly summarize what the actual consensus items that we have consensus on? Or can you not do that briefly?
No, I think I can. Consensus is that staff and the project applicant need to come back with accurate calculation of lot coverage, and that the board would consider the 10% increase over what is allowable, but want to keep it within that 10% and not go over the 10% into what would be considered a variance. With that reduction in lot coverage, it is hoped that maybe additional setback and or landscaping could occur, especially on the Lincoln side. The signage, however, is appropriate, but that the landscape plan should not include the palm tree. And that is what the consensus items were.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Sure. I move that we continue the project to allow the applicant to work with staff to respond to the consensus items as outlined by Leslie.
That was Stuart Summers making the motion. Is there a second?
Sarah Reggie, second.
Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? I have clarification, Stuart. Are you making that the motion that this goes through the staff and we no longer see it? Or
No, work with staff and bring it back to us.
Bring it back to us. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Okay, Leslie, would you make a roll call vote?
Yes. Board Member Blaney is absent. Board Member Kent.
Aye.
Board Member Kowalski.
Aye.
Board Member Summers.
Aye.
Vice Chair Reggie.
Aye.
And Chair Paul.
Aye. So that motion carries unanimously, I guess.
Yep.
All right, well, thank you. And good luck in revising your project. We're going to move on now to the director's report.
Yes. So at Monday's council meeting, an urgency ordinance for ADUs was passed, and it is restricting ADU development on certain streets based on their the width and the steepness. That urgency ordinance is good for 45 days, by which time staff is tasked to bring back an official ADU ordinance to replace the urgency ordinance. Another more happier thing, the contract for construction of 2 new fire stations was approved by council as well on Monday. So that is super positive to have 2 more stations. And then I also just wanted to say is that I did follow up. I spoke with someone at Marin Water, and there's still a little confusion on enforcement of actual watering. But that said, Marin Water is one of the reviewers of all building permit plans, which includes the landscape plans, and does need to sign off. And project applicants, or I guess project owners, project proponents, are required to file a notice on the property that they won't use potable water for landscaping. You all may know this, but I learned that any new landscaping that is 1,000 square feet or more is required to have a dedicated meter. And that dedicated meter would only be approved if it could be potable water. And I'm not going to have the sanitary districts correct, but is it Las Colinas that's in the north does provide that service. So that is an opportunity, or a possibility, I should say, for projects that are served by that sanitary district. But those that are served by the other sanitary district do not have that opportunity at the moment. So as we move forward.
That it?
Yes, that's all on my end.
What were the 2 fire stations that are up for?
Oh goodness, I don't know. I could. Yes.
And when will we see
I
the
was
text?
told at like 4 p.m. Yes, yeah.
When will we see the text of this, or could you forward the board the text on this urgency ordinance on the ADUs and the restrictions?
Most definitely.
That would be pretty nifty, since every phone call I get is someone who wants an ADU, like quite literally.
I will forward that to you.
I'm going to shoot myself if I have to do another one. Helping that housing element.
Is there any board communications? Seeing none?
Are we back in 2 weeks, Leslie? Does it look like?
Oh goodness, I just closed it. I believe we are, and I will, when I send out the urgency ordinance, I will confirm that. I know we were pretty heavily scheduled, and now a few things have started to fall off the calendar, but I will let you know that as well by the end of the week.
Yeah, holidays. Okay.
So if
All right.
that's
Yep.
the next one would
Okay.
be November 2nd.
Actually, I know for a fact because you said the date. That one we do not have anything, so that one will be canceled.
So then the next one after that would be November 16th.
That is correct.
Okay, if
And
it
that
is,
is just tentative. That is tentative at the moment, not a
if it
definitive.
is, I don't think I'm going to be in town, so
Okay.
Sarah can be the chair.
Okay.
All righty.
All right, then we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Later.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.